We are ready.
Charles County Public Schools, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Charles County Public Schools. Our students are excited to talk to you, so let's take our first question.
What interesting things are you guys discovering with your experiments on board the ISS in space?
Oh, there's a lot of interesting things going on here at any time. At any time up here, we're doing research on new medical vaccines, for example. We're doing material science research. We're developing new technologies to further space exploration so that we can go beyond low Earth orbit and go back to the moon and Mars or asteroids. There's always research going on. You can see behind us we got various types of human research going on. We are actually test subjects ourselves. Many of the testing and experiments that go on, actually, we are the subjects. So there's always interesting things going on up here, and we've got lots of scientists on the ground supporting us around the clock, basically.
If you didn't become an astronaut, what would you be?
Hi, Morgan. That's a great question. And in fact, if I hadn't become an astronaut, I would have still been doing what I was doing when I did become an astronaut, and that's I was a colonel in the United States Air Force. In fact, I've only been an astronaut for the last 4 years, so most of my adult life I've spent in the Air Force testing airplanes and working in an area we call program management, so basically helping to purchase and develop new technologies for the Air Force. And so that kind of leads into the next point of I loved what I was doing in the Air Force, and so if any of you are out there interested in becoming astronauts, the most important thing is to find something you love and to do that and do it well, and if becoming an astronaut works out, that's just a bonus.
Why doesn't the sun make outer space bright?
Well, the sun emits electromagnetic radiation. It emits sunlight, if you will, all over all directions. But you need an object to actually reflect that sunlight to see it. So, for example, the Earth is bright in the daytime because it's reflecting the sun's light. And that sun is still traveling through space. It lights up the space station. If you look up in the sky after sunset sometimes, you could actually see the space station flying overhead. And that's because the sun is hitting the space station and lighting it up.
Are you scared when you are taking off in space?
Hi, Victoria. That's an interesting question. Rick, this is his fourth space flight, I think, and this was my first time up. And so, the nice thing was we have a lot of training to get ready for the space flight and for that launch. And once you crawl into the rocket for real, it just kind of becomes a little bit routine because that's how you've been practicing and that's how you've done simulations, and so you just start going through your procedures, and then the next thing you know, you're up in space. And so fortunately you're busy enough, you've got enough things to do that you don't have a lot of time to think about being scared.
What inspired you to be an astronaut and go up into the space station?
Hey, Nina, that's a great question. When I was about your age, I was always interested in science. Whenever my teachers would talk about space or about airplanes or rockets, I would get very excited and pay very close attention. And I also was very good at math. So math and science was just a natural thing for me. And when I went to high school, that continued. And I went on to college and became an engineer. And then eventually I started sending in applications to NASA. So I guess what inspired me the most was it's so exciting. Working for NASA is an incredible job. We do a lot of great things, not just as astronauts, but as engineers and scientists at NASA. And NASA is a great place to work, and it was a perfect fit for me just because of my love of math and science.
Have you ever done an experiment on the International Space Station where the results surprised you?
That's a great question, and Rick alluded to it earlier. We have what we call principal investigators on the ground that have designed a lot of the experiments that we do up here. One of the ones that I've worked with is it's called a capillary flow experiment, and that actually means we're looking at fluids, so a water, and what air or gases do in that fluid. And so they were trying to separate the gas from the liquid just by the shape of the vessel, and because the water acts a little bit differently up here in space. And so the results of that, just based on the shape of a vessel, were very interesting.
How does it feel to walk on Earth when you come back from no gravity?
Well, that's a good question. I've flown on the space shuttle 3 times, but I was only in space for 2 weeks. And so when I landed on board on the space shuttle, landed back at the Kennedy Space Center, I felt a little bit weak, but it wasn't too bad because I was only in space for 2 weeks. But the biggest concern that I had was my ears. It was kind of like after being on a roller coaster or a ride at an amusement park, your head's kind of spinning sometimes for a few minutes. Well, that's how I felt when I first landed on Earth. And that lasted only about an hour or two, and then that went away. Now, this mission, I'm going to be in orbit for 6 months, but we exercise every day for 2 hours. So hopefully when I land, I'll be strong enough to walk and just be just fine.
Could you keep a living organism like a fish in space?
Nina, great question, and the answer is yes. In fact, we've had in previous experiments, we've had fish on the space station, we've had spiders, we've had butterflies, and so there's definitely been living organisms up here. Right now, we don't have any animals or insects or fish or anything, but we do have, I've been doing a little bit of experimenting on my own, and so you can actually, if you can see that, that's a sunflower that I've been growing, and it's not doing too bad, but it's probably not growing quite as fast or as tall as it might be down on Earth.
Hello. As an astronaut, what are the problems you deal with and how do you solve them?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we have a lot of problems up here, little problems, just like if you were working on your car or you're doing your homework or you have to clean your room. You know, anytime you do something, you run into little problems, like you can't find you want to do your homework, but you can't find a pencil. You know, so when we're up here, like today, I had to do something. I had to load up some new software on a device, and I couldn't find a card to slide into the thing. It took about 30 or 40 minutes. So basically, you know, we just got to remain patient, and we got a whole team of folks on the ground. We got thousands of folks on the ground, and they're very smart, and they know the answers to just about all our questions. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So we have a big team of folks that help us out on a regular basis, and we seem to be able to solve just about any problem we run into.
What if one of the astronauts gets sick? What will they do?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we do what you we do what you do, and we call the doctor. Actually, we have a flight doctor that's tracking us. He kind of keeps watch over us, or they keep watch over us as we're on our 6-month mission. But if we do have problems up here, we're all trained. We have some initial training or some basic training on how to treat people, and so this is actually one of our emergency medical treatment packs, and so if it's serious enough, you know, we've got a lot of equipment up here, a lot of medicines that we can help take care of us. And then on this mission right now, there's 6 of us up here, and we're very fortunate that one of our crewmates on one of our cosmonaut Russian crewmates, he's actually a doctor as well. So we're in pretty good hands.
Do you ever have to worry about static electricity while in space?
Yes, we do worry about static electricity. That's an excellent question. Even when we're inside the space station here, we have to wear a grounding strap if we have to deal with sensitive electronics. If you ever open up your computer or any kind of electronics, even there on Earth, usually you wear a grounding strap to protect the electronics so you don't zap things. Okay, you're in Maryland, so you have winter there. You know, sometimes in the winter when it's really cold and it's dry out and you kind of rub your feet, your slippers, or your socks on the carpet, and you get a little zap on the doorknob. Same thing can happen up here or even outside when we're doing spacewalks. We have to worry about all those things, and so we take precautions to protect ourselves and the equipment.
What is the feeling you get when you enter the zero gravity after exiting the atmosphere at escape velocity?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So when I first entered space, got into the microgravity environment, it felt like, I want you to picture yourself sitting in your seat, except put it upside down on the ceiling. So you're all now sitting on the ceiling upside down. And that feeling of falling, that's what it felt like for me for probably the first 24 hours that I was in space. Certainly for the entire time once I got into space until we docked with the space station. And so it was a pretty uncomfortable feeling, but eventually your body gets used to it. You start to figure out that there's no real up or down, and it's quite enjoyable.
What kind of STEM work do you do to prepare for your explorations, and do you specialize in certain areas?
Well, of course, I am an engineer by training. I went to school to become an engineer. There's a lot of science and technology and math in that. As far as training as an astronaut, we have a long training period, which involves a lot of science because we're doing a lot of science experiments up here. Math is just a daily thing, and as an engineer or an astronaut, I mean, math is just in your life every day. We don't do anything specific to math in terms of training, but we use it on a regular basis. But our training is 2.5 years long. It's a lot of different technologies. It's a lot of different sciences, and engineering is involved. So it's an everyday thing for us.
What does it feel like to take off from Earth, and what does re-entry into our atmosphere feel like?
Yeah, that's another great question. So we launched on a Russian Soyuz rocket and spacecraft, and right now you guys are sitting down there in a 1G environment. So that's what Earth's gravity is pulling you down, and that's what you normally feel. During that launch, you actually see an increase in that gravity. So it feels like you feel like you're a little bit heavier as it's pushing down, and that's the same thing that'll happen when we're landing. Is we'll have an increase in what we call those Gs, but it doesn't last real long. Now, the other interesting part about the launch is the rockets have what we call stages, and as one stage ends and the next stage starts, there's a pretty good kick where you're thrown forward in your seat, and then when the next stage starts up, you get thrown back again. And so those are pretty exciting. Now, as far as the landing, I don't really know yet because this is my first mission, so I haven't had a landing yet, but I'm certainly looking forward to it in about 4 more months.
Are there any experiments currently going on that you can elaborate on?
Yeah, there's a lot of experiments going on. I'm just trying to think of the one of the ones that we could talk or that we can talk about just in a short period of time. Some of the things we're doing is a lot of remote medical evaluations. For example, the doctors like to be able to evaluate us from the ground. So we are actually almost trained ultrasound technicians, and we actually give each other ultrasounds, abdomens and heart, and we even do an ultrasound on our eye. And the folks down on the ground can review all this data. The doctors take this data and see, not just to see if we're healthy, but they're evaluating how our body changes in space. So we're doing a lot of things like that right now, and we'll be doing that throughout the 6 months.
I know that space travel can put the human body through a lot of stress. What kind of medical testing does an astronaut have to go to be physically and mentally fit for his duty?
Yeah, that's a great question. The medical test, gosh, I'm not sure if there's not a medical test that we haven't had. They put us through the ringer in terms of every kind of scan that you can imagine. We've probably had it. As well as medical checks, blood checks, the whole 9 yards. You get that actually if when you apply to become an astronaut, and if you're fortunate enough to go down for an interview, they actually go through that whole screening process medically just to make sure that you are physically fit. And in terms of fitness, we spend a lot of time on physical fitness, both on the ground before we launch and also up here, because that is one of the biggest impacts to the human body in the microgravity environment is, of course, as you see us floating around, you know, we don't use our legs as we're walking like you guys are down on the ground. And so our muscles have a tendency to become weaker, our bones get weaker, and so we need to counter that, and one of the ways we do that is with physical fitness. And so it starts with training on the ground to stay in as good a shape as we can, and then when we're up here, we probably work out about 1.5 hours to 2 hours every day.
What is the emergency protocol if an object such as an asteroid collides with the space station and has an accident like this happened before?
Hey, Chris. Yeah, we train for all kinds of emergencies up here. So if something hit the space station and caused the air to begin leaking out of the space station, we have all kinds of emergency procedures. Of course, we'll get alarms. We have automatic systems that detect the pressure changes. Alarms will go off. We'll immediately evaluate the situation, and we have our Soyuz vehicles. There's 6 folks up right here right now. We have 2 Soyuz vehicles. There's 3 folks in each Soyuz vehicle. So if the leak is big enough, we will have to abandon the space station. If the leak is small enough, we will start sealing off the compartments one by one to try to determine which of the compartments is leaking. If we determine which compartment is leaking, we can seal it off and save the rest of the space station. If we can't seal it off in time, then we will just get into our Soyuz, we'll suit up, and we'll basically come home.
In your opinion, would it be hard to live your whole life there if you had a life supply of food and water?
You know, that's a great question, and I think you have to kind of try and put it in perspective. So for me, yes, it would be very hard because I've left a wife and kids at home and the rest of my family as well. And so I think it would be very difficult to live up here without having them with me. On the other hand, if this is all you knew or your family was up here with you, well, you know, that could be a lot of fun to spend your life up here.
My name is Giljan Azar. I'd like to thank you for your time, answering our questions, and wish you safety and luck on your mission.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.